Hey guys, so these are your learning targets for today. Go ahead and get out your interactive notebook and write these down. I'm sure you will have questions over this tomorrow, but we will go over all of that when I get back. So right now, here are your learning targets. First of all, I can interpret points on a graph. And second of all, I can tell if a graph represents a proportional relationship. Now, hopefully, if you guys were to look at this chart of values for x and y, you would agree that this represents a proportional relationship. 1, 7, 2, 14, 428, 5, 35, those are all points that would be proportional if we were to write those in traditional proportion form. For example, 1 over 7 equals 2/14, because if we simplify both of those, we get 1/7 equals 1/7, and that is indeed proportional. So hopefully we are all in agreement that this chart represents a proportional relationship. You'll also notice that next to the values in the x column, I've written little times 7s next to those values, because if you multiply whatever number is in your x column by 7, you get whatever number is in your y column. So far, so good. You can also write these as points on like a coordinate grid. So rather than writing these values in a table, you can write them as points on a graph as well. So you'd have 1, 7, 2, 14, 428, and 535. Since we've made the observation that x times 7 equals y, we can go ahead and write that as an equation as well. And this equation simply represents this proportional relationship that we have in our table, our xy table. The next thing I'm going to do is graph these points from my table on a coordinate grid. And when I do that, I get a graph that looks like this. Now go ahead and pause the video here, because I would much rather you guys take a little bit of extra time and get a nice neat graph in your interactive notebook than you rush through and try to get this done as quickly as possible and end up with a mess that you can't read. So pause it, get this all copied down, and then we'll move on. Now you'll notice a couple of things about this graph. First of all, I have my pizzas. We're going to say that this is a relationship between pizzas and the cost for the entire order. So I have pizzas across the bottom, cost in dollars up the side, and then I've graphed my points here. So I have the point 17, 214, 428, and 535. And you'll notice that the line that I create when I connect my points is straight, or at least relatively straight. It should be straight. You'll also notice that my line goes through the point 0, 0. We call that the origin. These two traits are extremely important when you're recognizing whether or not a graph is a graph of a proportional relationship. Your line always has to be straight, and it always has to go through 0, 0. If your line is not straight, if it's a curve, if it changes direction, then it is not a proportional relationship. If you have a straight line, but that straight line doesn't cross through 0, 0, maybe it crosses through up here at like 20, or way down here somewhere in the negative numbers. If it does not cross through 0, 0 exactly, it is not a proportional relationship. Now on the assignment that you guys have that you're going to work on, there will be several graphs, and you're asked to determine whether or not those graphs are the graph of a proportional relationship or not. So you are going to be looking for those two things. You're also going to be asked several times to interpret the points on a graph. Here's what that means. Let's look at this 428 point, for example. That point 428 means something. It's not just a random set of numbers plopped on a graph with no meaning behind it. Those numbers each represent something. Now the 4, our x value, if we come down here, we see that that's pizzas. And your 28, if we come over here on our y-axis, you see that that is the cost in dollars. So if I were to interpret this point, I would say this means that 4 pizzas, don't worry about that comma, cost $28. That is how I would interpret the point. If I were to interpret this point up here, you don't have to write this one down, but I would say 5 pizzas cost $35. I'm essentially just giving real life meaning to the points on a graph. Go ahead and give this assignment your best shot. We will go over it tomorrow and talk about this in a little bit more detail. Good luck, work hard, I'll see you tomorrow.